Her stepmother threw her out at midnight. But what happened next will shock you. Left with nothing, alone in the dark, Kenya's fight for survival turns into a story of revenge, power, and unstoppable rise. Kenya was just 17 when her world fell apart. Her father, Jengo, the only person who ever truly loved her, had died 3 weeks earlier. His death came suddenly, and the whispers in the neighborhood spoke of poison, but no one dared say it out loud. Since the funeral, the house had turned cold, not from the weather, but from Adero, her stepmother. Adero had never hidden her dislike for Kenya, but now that Jengo was gone, the hate became cruelty. That night, the rain poured hard over Kibera town. Thunder cracked like a warning, and lightning flashed like angry eyes in the sky. Kenya sat quietly in the corner of her small room, hugging her knees, staring at the last thing her father gave her, a small pendant once worn by her late mother. The chain had broken, just like her life. She heard heavy footsteps. Then the door creaked open. Adero stood in the doorway with her arms crossed, eyes like stone. "Get up," she said coldly. "Your father's gone. You're not my burden. Get out. Now." Kenya blinked. "It's midnight," she whispered, her voice trembling. "And?" Adero snapped. "You think I care? Out." Kenya didn't even have time to grab her sandals. Adero dragged her up and pushed her through the front door. The cold rain hit her skin like sharp needles. She turned back, hoping this was just a nightmare, but Adero's face stayed hard. The gate clanged shut behind her. Kenya stood in the middle of the dark road, barefoot, soaked, and shaking. The only thing she had was the torn wrapper wrapped around her chest and her broken pendant clenched in her fist. No money, no phone, no place to go. She walked. The rain made it hard to see, but her tears made it worse. Every step hurt, the stones cutting into her bare feet, but she kept going. She passed houses with warm lights, laughter behind the windows. None of it belonged to her anymore. She stopped near an empty food stall and curled up under the wooden counter. Her stomach growled, her body trembled, her heart ached. Why did Adero hate her so much? Why now, in the middle of the night with no warning? She thought of her father, his voice, his smile, how he always told her, "You're meant for something greater, my star." But now, the stars were hidden by clouds, and greatness felt like a dream, lost in the storm. She held the broken pendant close to her chest and whispered, "Mama, Baba, please watch over me." And as the rain kept falling, Kenya lay on the cold ground, unaware that this cruel night would be the beginning of a destiny even Adero could never stop. Kenya walked without knowing where she was going. The rain didn't stop. Her bare feet slapped against muddy roads, each step heavier than the last. Her wrapper clung to her soaked skin, and the pendant in her hand was the only warmth she had. She passed empty streets, dark alleys, and silent compounds. No one opened their door. No one asked why a young girl was walking alone in the dead of night. She kept walking. Her feet began to bleed from sharp stones and broken glass. Her legs wobbled, but she didn't stop. She thought of knocking on someone's door, asking for help, but fear held her back. What if they were like Adero? What if they slammed the door too? By dawn, Kenya reached the town of Masuka. The sky was grey, the sun barely pushing through. The town was already awake. Motorbikes zoomed past, women argued over prices, and hawkers shouted about fresh bread and pap. The smell of roasted groundnuts filled the air, mixed with sweat and dust. Goats wandered through the crowd like they belonged there more than she did. No one noticed her pain. She stood in the middle of the chaos, soaked and shaking, while the world moved around her. Her eyes searched for kindness. Just one face, one hand, one heart. But people glanced and turned away. To them, she was just another lost girl, dirty, homeless, forgettable. Her stomach growled loud. She hadn't eaten since yesterday. Her throat was dry, her lips cracked. She saw a small tomato stall by the roadside. No one was there yet. Behind it, a broken umbrella leaned against the wall, torn at the edges. That was where she went. She crawled behind the stall, her knees scraping against rough concrete. The broken umbrella barely shielded her from the drizzle, but it was something. She curled into herself, holding the pendant tightly. Her tears fell fast now, mixing with the rain on her face. People walked past, shouting, laughing, selling, buying. No one saw her. She pressed her head against the cold wall and let everything out. The fear, the pain, the heartbreak. Her sobs were quiet, hidden under the noise of Masuka. She cried until her eyes burned and her body gave up. Then sleep took her, not because she was tired, but because her body had no more strength to stay awake. And as the town buzzed with life, Kinya, the girl who once had a home and a father who loved her, slept behind a tomato stall with nothing but a broken pendant and a broken heart. She didn't know what would come next. She didn't even care. All she wanted was one thing: peace. Just a little peace. But fate wasn't done with her. Not yet. A loud voice snapped Kinya awake. Her body jerked, confused and weak from hunger and cold. "Hey girl! You'll catch a fever sleeping here." The voice was sharp, but not unkind. Kinya looked up, blinking against the morning sun. Standing in front of her was a tall woman with warm eyes and a loud presence. Bright, colourful wraps were stacked perfectly on her head like a crown, and gold bangles jingled as she moved. It was Tamba, known across Masuka's market for her quick mouth and even quicker heart. She ran a second-hand clothing stall called Rewear Royalty, a small corner packed with old clothes that somehow looked magical when she folded them. Tamba frowned at the sight of Kinya, wet, dusty and shivering, behind the tomato stall. Without waiting for answers, she reached into her bag and pulled out a half loaf of bread, wrapped in brown paper, and a flask of warm tea. She handed them over. "Eat, child," she said. "No strength, no hustle." Kinya hesitated, her pride battling with her hunger, but the smell of the bread won. She took it with shaky hands and whispered, "Thank you." Tamba watched her for a moment. "You've got the eyes of a lioness," she said. "You're not finished yet. If you're willing to work, I've got a mat and a spot behind my stall. No promises, but it's better than the gutter." Kinya nodded slowly. She didn't ask what the job paid. She didn't care. Someone had seen her, helped her, and didn't ask questions. That was enough. The rest of the day moved fast. Tamba handed her a broom, and Kinya swept the dusty ground around the stall until it looked clean enough to sleep on. She sorted old clothes, folded them, picked out ones with loose hems, and sat cross-legged with a needle and thread, stitching quietly while customers came and went. Tamba talked non-stop, selling clothes, teasing regulars, bargaining like a warrior. But every now and then, she looked at Kinya and smiled, like a mother checking her child. And Kinya, despite the ache in her arms and the dirt on her knees, worked harder with each glance. By afternoon, Tamba handed her a small orange soda. "You did good," she said. "Not bad for a lioness cub." Kinya chuckled softly. It was the first time she had laughed since her father's funeral. The sound surprised even her. That tiny moment, sitting on a plastic stool, sipping soda beside a mountain of used clothes, felt like home. Not the house she was kicked out of, but something new, something she could build. That night, Tamba spread out a mat and gave Kinya an old blanket. "Sleep. Tomorrow's a new day," she said simply. Kinya curled up behind the stall, stomach full, heart a little lighter. The streets hadn't beaten her. Not yet. She had found an angel in the marketplace, and for the first time in weeks, she didn't cry before sleeping. She smiled. Days turned into weeks, and the market became Kinya's new home. She woke early, swept the stall, folded clothes, and brewed tea for Tamba. At night, when the market grew quiet and the sellers packed up, Kinya stayed behind with a needle in hand and a pile of torn clothes beside her. She worked under a small lamp, her fingers moving fast, stitching and patching until her eyes could no longer stay open. The other sellers began to notice her. Mama Osi, who sold herbs, often dropped off old clothes. Uncle Dowdy, the shoemaker, brought her bits of fabric he couldn't use. "For the lioness," they'd say, and Kinya, always grateful, turned those scraps into something new. One evening, after the crowd thinned, she sat with a mix of leftover fabrics, bright yellows, deep blues, burnt orange, and soft green. She didn't follow any design. She just sewed from her heart. Piece by piece, she created a dress unlike anything she'd seen before. It was bold, wild, and full of life, just like Masuka Market. When it was done, she hung it quietly on the corner of the stall and went to sleep. The next morning, as sellers opened shop and buyers filled the air with chatter, a well-dressed woman stopped in front of the stall. Her eyes locked on the dress. She ran her hand along the fabric and gasped, "Who made this?" Tamba smiled and pointed. "That girl, my assistant. She's got magic fingers." The woman turned to Kinya, who was too stunned to speak. "I want one, just like it, and 3 more, each different." Word spread fast. By the next afternoon, more women came asking for Kinya's dresses. Some brought their own scraps. Some begged her to choose the colors. They didn't care that it wasn't new cloth. They wanted her style, her touch. Tamba cleared a small table at the back of the stall and called it Kinya's Corner. Kinya worked with focus and fire. She no longer stitched just to survive. She stitched to shine. She turned rags into royalty, making each dress a statement of boldness and beauty. In the middle of chaos, she found rhythm. She knew how to mix colors the way music mixed drums and flutes. She didn't just sew, she told stories with thread. Customers who once walked past her without a glance now waited in line. They praised her hands, her eye, her gift. Some even asked for lessons. Kinya had no formal training, no machines, just an old needle, borrowed scissors, and belief in her own hands. And every time someone asked how she learned to sew like that, she would smile softly and say, "Pain taught me, but purpose kept me going." Tamba watched with pride as the girl she once found behind a tomato stall became the heart of rewear royalty. Kinya's light was no longer hidden. She had stitched herself a new beginning, one thread at a time. The sun rose over Masuka, and with it came whispers, smiles, and pointing fingers. "That's her," people said. "The girl who sews magic." Kinya's dresses had become the talk of the market, first through gossip, then through pictures on local phone apps. Shoppers took photos and posted them with captions like "Queen of Scraps" and "Style from the Streets." Her fame wasn't loud, it was steady, growing like fire from a single spark. Kinya didn't have a shop, just a bench beside Tamba's stall, and a cracked sewing machine that made a strange sound whenever she pressed the pedal. Tamba had borrowed it from her cousin who once used it to stitch curtains, but Kinya didn't complain. She cleaned it every morning, oiled the stiff wheels, and thanked it before each use. It wasn't perfect, but it helped her bring ideas to life. With every new customer, Kinya pushed herself. She tried different cuts, bold patterns, strange combinations. Some people laughed, others applauded, but no one could ignore her. Even the madam, who once turned up her nose at recycled clothes, now came whispering, "Make me something, but don't tell anyone where it came from." One busy afternoon, as Kinya wiped sweat from her forehead, a boy ran past shouting, "Big money coming to Masuka! Look! Look!" He dropped a stack of flyers. One floated and landed near Kinya's feet. She picked it up slowly. "Masuka Fashion Festival winner receives 5 million naira plus contract with Nshobi Royal House." She read it again and again. Her heart started racing. Her hands trembled. A royal contract, 5 million naira. It felt unreal, like a dream dropped in the middle of her day. The contest was open to all, even street designers. All they needed was one original piece. Tamba saw her staring and nudged her. "Are you going to enter?" she asked casually, though her eyes gleamed with hope. Kinya didn't answer right away. She looked at her hands, calloused, bruised, but steady. She remembered the night she was thrown out with nothing. She thought of the dress she stitched from scraps that made women feel beautiful. She looked at the poster again and whispered, "Yes, I will." That night, Kinya didn't sleep. She sat beside her sewing machine, surrounded by leftover fabric from old orders. She didn't sketch. She didn't plan. She just let her heart speak. She stitched slowly, carefully. Each thread carried a memory, a lesson, a prayer. She didn't have fancy fabric, no shiny buttons or imported lace, but she had vision, and she had truth. Her dress would be her story, from pain to purpose, from thrown out to rising up. As dawn approached, Kinya placed the finished dress on a hanger and stepped back. It was bold, raw, powerful. It didn't look like anything else, and that was the point. She smiled softly to herself. "This is my destiny, and I've sewn it with my own hands." The morning of the competition, Masuka buzzed with excitement. Designers from all over the region arrived with their models and garment bags. Some came in cars with tinted windows. Others had assistants carrying racks of carefully packed outfits. Kinya walked alone, holding a plastic bag with her handmade dress inside. Her shoes were worn out. Her hands were sore, but her eyes were steady. She hadn't slept in 7 nights. Every hour had gone into cutting, stitching, reshaping. She had no money for new fabric, so she had searched garbage bins, market corners, and even asked Tamba for torn umbrella covers and curtain lining. She turned rags into art, every color, every texture chosen with meaning. Her dress wasn't made of luxury, but it told a story no one could ignore. At the festival gates, people stared. Some chuckled. A tall woman in high heels whispered, "She's from the market." Another scoffed, "That can't be a designer, look at that bag." But Kinya kept walking, quiet but unshaken. She checked in her name and gave her model the dress. which shimmered strangely under the sun, like it didn't belong to this world. Backstage, other designers dressed their models in silk, sequins, and imported feathers. Kinya sat in a corner, pinning the last fold on the hem with shaking fingers. Her model, a shy girl from the yam stall named Dira, looked nervous. "Will they laugh at me?" Dira asked. Kinya smiled. "Maybe, but only until they see you shine." The show began. One by one, models walked the runway as music played. The crowd clapped politely. Judges took notes. When it was Kinya's turn, people leaned back, expecting nothing. The music stopped, and then Dira stepped onto the runway. Her dress caught the light in a way no one expected. Layers of umbrella fabric moved like waves. Curtain lace fluttered behind like wings. Bottle caps stitched around the waist sparkled like stones. It was strange. It was wild. It was beautiful. The crowd froze. Mouths hung open. A silence so loud filled the space. Then someone clapped. Another stood. Then the entire audience rose, cheering wildly. "This is genius! Who made this? It's recycled! No way!" Even the judges stood up. One of them took off her glasses and wiped her eyes. Kinya watched from behind the curtain, tears filling her eyes. All the pain, the nights on cold floors, the laughter from strangers, it all led to this moment. Her name was called. First place. The crowd chanted, "Kinya! Kinya! Kinya!" She walked onto the stage barefoot, shaking and smiling through tears. They placed a gold ribbon on her chest and handed her a giant check, 5 million naira. Flashbulbs exploded. Phones were raised. In that moment, she wasn't just the girl from the market anymore. She was a designer, a name, a legend born from scraps. And everything changed. The sun had barely risen when Adaro, sitting on a wooden bench outside her shop in Kibera, caught sight of the morning news on a neighbor's TV. The presenter's voice rang loud. "Meet Kinya, the girl from the streets who took Masuka Fashion Festival by storm." The screen showed Kinya holding her trophy, her face glowing with pride. Adaro's heart pounded, her hands clenched. Rage twisted her features. "Impossible," she spat. "That girl is a fraud." Fueled by jealousy, Adaro stormed through Kibera Market, shouting that Kinya was a liar. She told anyone who would listen that Kinya had stolen Django's money before running away. She claimed Kinya forged everything, that she had always been cunning, always pretending to be innocent. Her voice grew louder and more desperate with every word. But the world had changed since she kicked Kinya out that rainy night. In Masuka, people knew the truth. Market women, street boys, and shopkeepers had all seen Kinya sleep on cold floors, stitch with broken tools, and rise with nothing but her hands and her will. Within hours, videos began to circulate online. Tamba posted a video with tears in her eyes, explaining how she found Kinya shivering under a tomato stall. Dira, the young model, shared how Kinya made her feel beautiful in rags. Even the Masuka Festival judges released a statement praising Kinya's originality and honesty. "We watched her build her dreams from scraps," one judge said on air. "This is not theft, this is talent." Hashtags trended, Kinya the Queen, truth over lies. From streets to stardom, Adaro's lies crumbled fast. People in Kibera stopped listening. Some even laughed openly at her attempts. One woman shouted across the market, "You threw out gold and now you're choking on dust." Then the consequences hit harder. Her small stall, which sold powdered herbs and perfumes, was shut down by the village council. They found out she had never paid her stall fees for months. She begged, cried, claimed it was all a mistake, but no one believed her anymore. Respect had turned to mockery. Her so-called friends stopped talking to her. Even her apprentice left, saying, "I can't stay with someone who curses blessings." Adaro returned home to silence. The same house where she once threw Kinya out now felt empty and cold. She stared at Django's photo on the wall, her own reflection looking older, angrier, and lonelier than ever before. Outside, children played, laughing and imitating Kinya's runway walk. Her name echoed in the streets, not as a girl who suffered, but as a girl who rose above it all. And in the middle of her bitterness, Adaro realized something painful. Kinya hadn't just survived, she had won, and there was nothing Adaro could do to stop it. It was a quiet morning at the market. Kinya was folding new fabrics when a tall man in a brown jacket walked up to her stall. He looked like he had traveled far, dust on his shoes, eyes full of memory. He stood there for a moment, just watching her. Then he said softly, "You look just like your mother, Amina." Kinya froze. Her hands stopped moving. No one had mentioned her mother's name in years. The man introduced himself as Bako, once the assistant to a man named Sefu Odena. That name meant nothing to Kinya, at least not yet. Bako sat down on a wooden stool beside the stall. His voice shook slightly as he told her the story. Years ago, before Kinya was born, her real father wasn't Jengo. Her biological father, Sefu, had been one of the most famous fashion designers in all of Eastern Gambia. People flew across oceans just to wear his creations. He had built a fashion empire from the ground up, using bold African patterns and designs never seen before. And Amina, Kinya's real mother, had been his wife and muse, graceful, fearless, and full of light. But their lives changed during the political riots that swept through the country 16 years ago. Their home was raided, their business was destroyed. In the chaos, Sefu disappeared, never to be found. Some believed he was killed. Others believed he escaped and started over with a new identity. Amina, pregnant with Kinya, fled to Kibera town for safety. No one heard from her again, not even Bako. Kinya's heart pounded as she listened. Tears rolled down her cheeks. So many pieces suddenly made sense. The pendant her mother gave her, the way she always felt drawn to fabric, the way her hands moved as if they'd sewn 1,000 times before. It wasn't just luck or hard work. This was in her blood. Bako reached into his bag and pulled out a faded photograph. In it stood a younger Amina, radiant in a white dress stitched with golden thread, beside a tall man with sharp features and gentle eyes. He held her hand, smiling. On the back, in neat handwriting, it read, "Sefu and Amina, forever creating." Kinya clutched the photo like it was treasure. For years, she had thought her talent came from struggle, but now, she knew. It came from legacy. "I've searched for you since the day I found out Amina had passed," Bako said. "Your father would be proud. You are the stitch between his dreams and the future." Kinya looked around her tiny stall, her heart now full of more than pride. She wasn't just surviving, she was continuing a story that had once been lost in chaos, and now she was ready to tell the world who she really was. News of Kinya's victory at the Masuka Fashion Festival spread fast, reaching places she never dreamed of. But the biggest surprise came one bright morning when a royal messenger arrived at her small stall, dressed in elegant robes and carrying a sealed letter. The messenger handed her the envelope with a respectful bow and said, "This is from the Queen of Neshobe." Kinya's hands trembled as she broke the seal. The letter read, "Dear Kinya, your creativity and strength have captured the hearts of many, including mine. I have watched your journey from afar. Your vision for fashion is bold and full of life, the very future we need. I invite you to Neshobe Palace to design the coronation dress for my daughter, Princess Zalira. Your unique touch will make her day unforgettable." Kinya couldn't believe her eyes. The Queen of Nshobe, the highest authority in the region, known for her refined taste and wisdom, wanted her. A girl who had once slept behind a tomato stall was now being summoned to the palace. Her mind raced. She remembered the nights spent sewing under dim lights, the cold mornings when she shivered but kept working, the laughter of Tamba at the market, and the sneers of those who doubted her. All of it had led here. This was more than a job. It was a chance to rewrite her destiny. She packed her few belongings, kissed Tamba goodbye, and journeyed to Neshobe. The palace was grand beyond words, with towering pillars, shimmering tiles, and gardens bursting with exotic flowers. Guards in polished armor greeted her with respect, recognizing the honor she had earned. Inside the grand hall, Queen Amara awaited. She was regal and warm, her eyes kind but strong. "Kinya," she said, "your vision is the future, not just for fashion, but for our people. I want you to design the coronation dress for my daughter. It must tell a story of strength, beauty, and hope." Kinya bowed deeply. She felt the weight of responsibility, but also the fire of excitement. Designing a dress for a princess was not just about fabric. It was about history, culture, and dreams. She spent days sketching, sewing, and perfecting every detail. She combined traditional patterns with modern flair, using colors that symbolized courage and unity. When Princess Zalira stepped onto the balcony wearing Kinya's creation, the crowd gasped. The dress shimmered in the sunlight, a perfect blend of elegance and power. The princess moved with grace, proud to wear the symbol of a new era designed by the market girl who refused to give up. Kinya's journey from outcast to icon was complete. She had sewn more than dresses. She had stitched hope into the fabric of her community. The palace doors were now open to her, and her name was whispered with respect and admiration. Her past struggles did not define her. Her vision and courage did. And as the sun set over Nishobi, a new chapter began, not just for Kenya, but for all those who dare to dream beyond their circumstances. Months had passed since Kenya's stunning rise from the dusty market to the grand palace. Now, she owned a massive fashion house in Masuka, buzzing with energy and creativity. Her workshop was alive with the hum of sewing machines and chatter of dozens of employees, young men and women who once faced the same struggles she had. Not only did she run a thriving business, but Kenya also funded schools for children in the market, giving them hope and skills to build better futures. One bright afternoon, Kenya decided to visit the bustling market that had once been her entire world. As she walked among the stalls, her heart warmed by the familiar smells of roasted groundnuts and fresh produce. Her eyes caught a figure sitting under the blazing sun. A woman, ragged and weak, held out a hand. The woman was none other than Adero, the stepmother who had thrown her out at midnight months ago. Their eyes locked, hers filled with shame, Kenya's steady and calm. The market buzz faded into silence around them. Adero's voice was barely above a whisper as she pleaded, "Help me, please." Kenya paused, then reached into her bag and handed Adero a bottle of water. She didn't speak harsh words or revengeful curses. Instead, her voice was gentle but firm. "God saw everything. I forgive you, but I'll never forget." There was power in Kenya's forgiveness, not because she forgot the pain, but because she chose not to let it hold her back. She turned away with her head held high, her eyes shining with pride and hope. The girl who was once cast out, hungry and alone, was now a symbol of strength and resilience. Her journey taught everyone around her a simple truth: never let someone else's cruelty define your worth. Even when the world pushes you to the darkest nights, your light can rise. Even when you have nothing, you can become everything. Kenya's story wasn't just about fashion or fame. It was about courage, forgiveness, and rising above the shadows. Her life was a message to every dreamer struggling in silence. No matter how hard the midnight betrayal, your dawn is coming. And as she walked through the market that day, Kenya carried more than success. She carried a legacy of hope that would inspire generations to come. If Kenya's journey has touched your heart, remember this: no matter how dark your night feels, no matter how many times life pushes you down, your light can still shine brighter than ever. Pain and betrayal may try to break you, but forgiveness and strength will build you up. Kenya chose to rise above cruelty, to forgive but never forget, and that made her unstoppable. Her story is proof that even when you have nothing, you can become everything. So, if you're watching this right now and struggling with hardships, hold on. Your time to rise will come. Believe in yourself like Kenya believed in hers. Let this story inspire you to keep fighting, keep dreaming, and never let anyone else define your worth. If you found this story powerful, please hit the like button and share it with someone who needs to hear this message today. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more amazing African tales that remind us of hope, courage, and the strength within us all. Your support means the world and helps us bring these stories to life. Thank you so much for watching and being part of this journey. Remember, even at midnight, your light can rise. Stay strong, stay hopeful, and keep shining.